everyone. Welcome to another episode of Convos with Sazón with yours truly, Cata Mejía. With me today, I have Simon Hyun. He is the creator and also an artist of PigeonBePigeon, which is based here in New York. Simon, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
All right. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Well, as you may or may not know, this year actually marks 400 years since New York City was founded. And one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on, in addition to me being very familiar with your work, having seen it all over the city in seasonal markets, is the essence of the city that you capture in your work. So tell me how you started and how did the concept originate?
Yeah. So PigeonBePigeon came about actually a little bit later from when I originally started as my journey into the full-time artist career. When it officially started, the brand itself, it went under numerous names. And when I was actually just registering the business, it was just Simon Hyun, the brand. I just registered my name as the brand. But it came about during a year before the recession hit back in 2008, 2007. I was working in a student loan company in the mailroom at the time. And they did, basically what they did with the mortgages, but for student loans. And they saw the writing on the wall before the entire financial system collapsed. So the company actually went under a year before the global recession hit. And I collected unemployment super early and ended up using the unemployment money and getting a studio in Brooklyn with the money. And that's when I saw this opportunity to use unemployment money to subsidize an art studio so that I don't have that pressure of how am I going to pay for the art studio, but instead just focus on making something.
Prior to taking a chance on yourself, right, and taking that leap to open up an art studio, did you always have a passion for art?
Yes. Growing up, I always doodled. I was always a daydreamer, and I translated those daydreams into, doodles outside the lines of loose leaf paper while I was taking notes in school. And then I went to an art school through a recommendation from my junior high school art teacher. They were just like, oh, yeah, you're really into this. Have you looked into LaGuardia High School? And I was like, no, what is that? Growing up in the city, you only know about Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, or what's the other one? Lincoln Tech? No, not Lincoln Tech. Whichever. The other one in Brooklyn Tech. And those are the only three schools that you were allowed to go to in high school. But if being from an Asian parent, only Stuyvesant was the option. But but I wasn't smart academically because I daydreamed all the time. And when I heard about the admission process, it basically kind of solidified, and I didn't know this at the time, the rest of my life, effectively. And just kind of went through the high school the motions, learning a little bit of skill from all the different mediums, and then kind of taking that into, all right, what am I going to do for college, kind of a route.
And what did you do for college? Was it art?
It was... Yes, it was. I ended up going into my first 2 years was jewelry designing. So I went from an art high school and I applied for the jewelry program because to me I was like, oh, that looks interesting and I've never done anything like this. Let me do it. The first year was an absolute shit show. Can I curse on this actually?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. It was chaotic. It was chaotic. Because you were doing your entire, field worth of work, and then you were also doing all because it was a SUNY, FIT. I went to FIT, the Fashion Institute, and it was also a SUNY, so you had to do all the academic stuff. So, and on top of that, I was working a part-time job. So it was I was going to school Monday through Saturday. Monday through Friday was 12 to 8 each day, and then Saturday from 12 to 3, and then I went to work after that, and I worked on the weekends. So it was just absolute chaos, but I was still able to do it. It just kind of went by really fast. And then eventually I took a couple of years off. I got my associates, and I was like, well, what do I want to do really? That was kind of fun, but after the second year, I was like, this isn't really what I want to get into. it's too precise, and I love the spontaneousness of creating art instead of just straight up manufacturing, which is how the school or how the program was kind of gearing its students. And then took a couple of years off and went back into it in the textile program. And then I think that's when I fell in love with screen printing. And the rest is kind of history from that, because I was able to kind of, after the program was done, that's when I got a job in the student loan company. And then the recession hit, and then I was like, oh, no companies are going to be hiring now. But I was able to set up a little like a home studio while I was living with my parents in my bedroom.
Nice. So would you say that recession was the turning point for you to be able to pursue this full time?
It was the start of something I had no idea where it was going to take me. I wouldn't say it was a turning point, because to me, the first few years was me trying to figure myself out as an artist.
Yeah.
And what I mean by it sounds really like generic, but like what I mean was, what was my passion? What was my style? What was my palette? Like what am I gonna make? Am I gonna just be making T-shirts, posters, paintings, murals? I didn't know. To sustain the studio, I got into screen printing and I got into T-shirts, and I ended up just selling that on the street, because to me that was kind of like a very easy flip kind of a thing. Like, all right, you have a tax ID with the city, you can apply to a wholesale account with any of the warehouses that are plentiful around the area. You get blank T-shirts and you sell them for $20, and it just seemed like such a simple business model that anyone can do it. And that's what got me into the whole business world of how to sustain the art studio, but then sell a product to sustain the art studio. Okay. And that was kind of the beginning of it.
So talking about the point you just made of trying to find your voice, trying to find your style, is it more of just doing whatever comes to mind and seeing what sticks, or how did you approach that process?
So seeing what other people sold on the street, I kind of walked around various areas that are like heavily populated with tourists, and I would particularly look at what were the street vendors selling. Like, you can tell when their street vendors are just like, they're just selling a thing that they found. Like, if you see a guy on 34th Street selling like mattress covers, like, obviously like they're just kind of buying and flipping it. But then every now and then you'll see some guys selling these tiny little sculptures of something that he's making on the spot, or you'll see somebody selling illustrations of something. And it's just like, what are they selling? And like, what are they making? And then specifically, you see a lot of like artists selling cool graphic T-shirts. So what was on their T-shirts? And that's what I was kind of paying attention to. Beyond just a brand embroidered across the chest, some people literally painted a shirt at a time on the street, which I thought was super cool. And one thing that a lot of these T-shirt brands, these like indie T-shirt brands had in common is that they all sold their version of their view of the city. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I have a camera. Like, let me go around the city taking some photographs. And that was the first step towards my urban brand, which eventually turned into PigeonBePigeon.
Okay, so for those who don't know, those who maybe aren't putting two and two together of what your work actually looks like, right? It's the pigeons looking out into like the Chrysler Building or the Empire State, or really just looking out into New York City. So how did you eventually land on that idea? I'm assuming through your photography based on what you just said?
Yeah, so as I was taking cliche, New York City skyline photographs, I every now and then I'll notice like, oh, a pigeon is perched in an interesting way on a windowsill. And I would, kind of diverge my composition from whatever the landscape was. And I just started taking just photographs of the pigeons. And, every now and then you'll see a pizza crust on the floor, and you'll see the standoff between sparrows and pigeons. And it's like, who's going to take it first? And it's always the sparrow. And it was just really quirky that in my mind, I saw this sort of like scenario played out, and I just kind of filled in the silence with my own dialogue. And that kind of turned into the beginnings of the cartoons that I draw now, which are just what would be the dialogue of a pigeon if we personified them. And honestly, in my opinion, they would just be what New Yorkers, just any mundane situation that we would encounter, because they're living their own version of their lives as we are to ours.
I love that because I mean, your artwork, as I mentioned before, like, yes, it has pigeons, but you also have some crossovers. You have a pride collection, you have aliens taking over New York. Where did that
Yeah.
idea in particular stem from?
The alien concept, there's like one where like a UFO is destroying the city, is kind of like, instead of creating a hypothetical dialogue or a personal dialogue, to me that's just like an extension of my silliness without saying it. Like, that's my kind of sense of humor that I wanted to kind of sprinkle in there without being so, blatant on how I want to depict, what I want to say. It's when you come out with something, you're kind of treading on eggshells in some degree. You don't want to post anything or create anything that veers too political or too opinionated. You just want to keep it as neutral as possible. So because of that, I kind of wanted to impose my sense of humor without really forcing it down anyone's throat. And I just thought of it as, well, instead of putting words into it, let me just depict this sort of imagery that's just kind of ridiculous. And that's where the alien thing started, where it's kind of like my social commentary of what I thought society would be doing in the hypothetical event aliens started destroying their city. Pigeons would bust their cell phones out and record it before veering for their own safety.
I understand that 100%. I know exactly what you mean because I've seen it play out in humans in real life, obviously. Yeah. I'm curious to know if your life experiences have influenced your art beyond just trying to find the balance between how to include your social commentary into the artwork itself. So if maybe there are symbols that you include that only you know what it's paying homage to.
Yeah, there's definitely like sneaky quirks that I put in some pieces every now and then. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but if you ever see a pigeon with headphones on, like that pigeon is me. Like, if you'll see it every now and then, and everyone always makes a comment of, why is this the only pigeon that's by itself? Like, they'll see that it stands out in some degree besides being an interesting composition. It's always the one that stands out a little bit, but I always go around the city with headphones. And so the headphone pigeon cartoon is my own personal self-portrait that I sneak into my brand.
I love that. How would you say the original concept has evolved to where it is now?
So it used to be hypothetics,
okay,
like metaphorical or just hypothetical situations that I would create, almost like a script, to being more of my own personal experiences or emotions or just things that I've lived in one way or another, but translated into a very open-ended, relatable concept. But before, it used to just be like, a very edgy, cursing pigeon because that's what they expect out of a New York persona. And I try to channel that into a cartoon, but it just felt too, it didn't feel genuine. It felt like I was trying to create something and I was trying too hard to create it, but I needed to just live it. And then everything would fall into place if I experienced it first.
I love that. Walk us through your creative process a little bit in terms of the decision making when it comes to selecting the buildings that you do, or selecting the quotes in particular, selecting when to include color versus when to leave it black and white.
So the landscape was kind of like I always put a Chrysler building in all my cartoons. I do like the Chrysler building personally a little bit over the Empire State Building.
That's my favorite building too.
As a very recognizable icon, but it kind of has something to do with a little bit to do with the framing of the dialogue. The pigeons themselves, they're bulbous. If I put a very rigid building like the Empire State, it just feels a little imbalanced. So by putting a very bulbous building like how I drew the Chrysler, it frames the dialogue a little. It emphasizes the dialogue. How I decide on whether it's black and white or color, it's really just what I feel like doing at the time. A lot of the core of everything I create is all pen and ink, so that's just always going to be black and white. when I start going into color, I try to keep it without any sort of direct dialogue. So to set the tone, set the mood of that kind of a piece without directly saying it, without directly saying I love you in a piece, how can I portray the colors to show passion and romance and love? So that's where I get to be a little bit more playful with how I come up with the colors. And honestly, like you can go with black and white for so long before you just get burnt out by it, and then you're just like, all right, I gotta just splash some color into this. And there'll be a lot of failed color compositions, and I'll just redo it until something just feels right.
Love it. In terms of the quotes, do you have a favorite that you've used so far?
I can tell you, like, I have a best-selling quote,
Okay.
which is, it's any of the love and romance ones are pretty popular. Any of the food ones are popular, but one that I have that I don't sell too often anymore because I'm kind of slowly. I'm not saying I'm phasing out any of the cursing dialogues, but I'm kind of keeping it a little bit more family friendly. But I have a cartoon where a pigeon was saying to another pigeon that I almost had my shit together once. And that particular dialogue was actually the turn. I want to go back to what we were saying earlier. Cartoon was a turning point of me actually being serious with my brand. And that rooted from when I was still like that moment when I was like discovering myself, but then I was maintaining in a way where I thought I felt invincible. You know what I mean? Like I felt like, oh great, the money's coming in and the business is doing well. Let me live a life of debauchery, and in so many ways. And yeah, I kind of partied a lot, and I didn't really, I wasn't a finance major. Like I didn't keep track of my finances. There was a time when I finished up a holiday season, and this is before I applied to any of those Christmas Village markets. I just worked all the time. At least I thought I did. And I think I only had enough money in my account for like 2 months worth of rent. And this included my apartment. And that's when I realized that I kind of messed up. And, I was about to kind of shut everything down and move everything to storage, break the lease of everything, move back with my parents. And it was actually a really dramatic moment. I was like something right out of the movies. I was like literally on the floor of my studio, looking around, seeing everything in my studio, remembering how I obtained it, and remembering, well, I felt like I wasted my time doing all this. Like everything I built up, I wasted my time because of this one moment where I felt like I had to give it all up. And that's when I was about to reach out to my landlord, reach out to, my parents and be like, hey, I think I'm going to move back, and tell my landlord I got to break the lease, and I was going to apologize. And I was apologizing. And I was literally on the floor, like just crying, just really feeling like sorry for myself, but also I just really angry that I really felt like I just pissed all this away. And I want to say that I came really close to sending out that email. But then I ended up just kind of like, all right, after like an hour, like, what can I do? Like, what are my choices? So I ended up deleting that email and texting my studio landlord directly. And, kind of like, hey, I messed up. Is it okay if I can pay rent late? And this is just a Hail Mary. And within 5 minutes, she's like, yeah, that's not a problem. Like, what are you thinking? And I think it was January at the time. I had enough money until the end of February. I asked her if I can start paying my rent in like May or June. So like, can she give me like 4 or 5 months? Again, this is a Hail Mary. And if she said no, I would have been like, all right, I'm gonna pack my shit up and get out of here. And she said, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, okay, this is my chance.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I quit drinking for like 8 months, quit smoking cigarettes, everything that involved wasting money. I put that all on pause. and I just took any little gig I can get. If I offered to clean the bathroom in the studio building. It's like, if I can get $25 for that, I can save that towards my deadline, which is May. And then I sold on the streets almost every single day. And most of the days in January and February, when it's like 20 degrees, trying to sell T-shirts on the street, you come out with donuts day after day. And but every now and then I'll make $5-10, and that's what I'll use towards buying food. Or sometimes I'll make $50, and then I'll stash aside $20 of that and use like $10 of that towards food. And I went really meager. Like, I would literally go to the takeout spot and just order like a small container of rice, or get like a 5 for $1, top ramen, and stretch it. And I went all in on just trying to make it work. And by the time May hit, it was spring, business was picking up, and that's when I decided, all right, I'm going to just work every single day. I'm just going to work. I'm going to go out there. If I can make $20, it's $20. And if you go out every day, it starts stacking up really quick. And then that's when I was able to get out of my situation. So all that to say, that cartoon is a summary of all that went on.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that, first of all. It takes a lot. I'm curious to know if during that time when you were going through so much personally, right, and it was intertwined with your work life as well, with your art, your passion, and ultimately what was giving you a living, did you see a noticeable change in the art itself during those months?
It was, I hate to say this, but I started hating making T-shirts during that time. I saw it as this was my route to failure. And I would do it because it was paying the bills, but I started losing the passion for it. And I didn't know what to do. And but I still did it, because at the time I didn't have a plan B. And that's when I started kind of going into the pigeon cartoons. And it kind of came out a little bit more spontaneously. There's like a version of it where I tell to people like, oh, it came out from like inside jokes between friends. That's kind of true, because I do, give these out as gifts all the time. The first cartoon that I ever drew was just me laying down in bed. Well, how I came to draw it. I was laying in bed, and I had this idea of two pigeons talking to each other, and one had a really bad day, and the other pigeon made a comment about how at least that pigeon still has all of its toes. And I was just in bed thinking about it, and I was kind of cackling at myself, and I just got up out of bed, and I was like, I just got to draw this. Like, what does this look like? I have the dialogue, I have the idea, and in my head, it was just literally two photographic pigeons I thought I was going to Photoshop the dialogue above it, but I ended up just doodling a stick figure of a pigeon, and with the dialogue. And I thought that was really the start of it. And I just went from that cartoon to another one of a pigeon, another pigeon having a bad day. So the other pigeon brought a 6-pack of beer to the other pigeon. And the first response was about how tiny those beers are, because they're pigeon-sized beers. And I just kept on going and drawing literally into the sunrise, like for like 4 or 5 hours of cartoon after cartoon after cartoon. And this was when I was still living with my parents. My dad wakes up because he has a really early shift. He looks at me. He's like, "Have you been drinking?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Did you go to bed yet?" I'm like, "Yeah, I woke up. I just woke up early." He's like, "All right, but you haven't been drinking." I'm like, "No." It's like, "All right, I'm going to go early for work." I'm like, "Okay." It was a father-son moment.
Speaking of the evolution of the work, right? Just to clarify, what was on the T-shirts?
It was my photographs of New York City. It started going into the pigeon concept because I would do pigeon silhouettes with my photography in it.
Got it. Okay. So circling back to the evolution. T-shirts, hand drawing, the pigeon is kind of the common thread through it all. And in conjunction to that is also New York. So having been raised here in New York, why do you think it's so important for you to still incorporate key aspects of the city in your work? Is it maybe because it's a central part of your life as well?
It's what I know best growing up in the city. You know, when I create these images, I want to give them a location. And they didn't have to have a location, right? Like I could actually have been a little bit more universal, just have the pigeons, just have a dialogue, and then I could have brought it to any city, and then everyone would say, "Oh, that's my city." But I wanted to give them an actual root of where these came from, a home base. Yeah, I wanted to let people know where these pigeons, specifically these pigeons, came from, and that's why I incorporated that little building. That's why I incorporated that little skyline with the Chrysler Building, because it seems really random because it's just a pigeon with a dialogue and a tiny little landscape that I drew on it. But it was just for me to give a location to these and where they're coming from. And everything I create now, especially now more than ever, is not just a product. It is a product, but it's me first. It's who I am translated into a thing that I created somehow.
And I would almost argue that an extension of that is how others who see your art interpret that. So speaking of your audience, right, your customers, those who may have discovered you because of the markets, just like I did.
Yeah.
What message or what impression do you want to leave on them through your work?
Man, if they can leave with a smile and still enjoy it, or at least have a good memory, a positive memory, like that really means the world. It's funny that you say that, because I literally just had somebody message me on Instagram like a couple of days ago. Actually, during the whole July 4th weekend, somebody messaged me saying that they bought one of my pieces like 7 years ago, and they showed me a picture of which one they got, and it was an old style of how I used to draw the cartoons versus how I draw them now. And she just wrote me a message saying that she just moved to a new place, and this is still one of her favorite drawings that she picked up, and she just wanted to let me know that. I'm like, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And a lot of times people will get these things as gifts and to people, and who knows where they end up. A lot of people will get them given to like their boyfriends or girlfriends, and half of them are probably in the garbage and dump right now. But I don't know. I don't know where they go. Once they leave my table, I don't know where they go. But if it can still leave that kind of a lasting impression of any form of joy or happiness, I mean, heck, it's working. It's awesome.
That's beautiful. Speaking of old style versus new style, do you keep an inventory or an archive of sorts of every piece that you have made, even if it's just for your purposes?
Yeah, I definitely. I have all my cartoons. I scan, and then I have a bunch that are like just ideas, right? Like they're just like, all right, is this offensive? And they'll be in like a maybe pile, and a lot of them actually don't make the list. Like what I post on Instagram is after filtering through maybe like 20, 25 cartoons that I think might work or might be relatable or might be funny or something. One of those pillars. But then a lot of them are just random thoughts. Kind of like similar to like how comedians would come up with like jokes. Like you just write the same idea, but you write it over like several times and see which one kind of flows properly.
Yeah.
And I'll do that with my illustrations too. Like I'll write it in one way and rewrite it again.
During the various iterations of your work, have you ever faced a creative block, and how have you gotten past that to continue to search for inspiration?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. And the older it gets worse. Like, because, and I'm not saying that to be discouraging. It's, if you work on something that is effectively going to be your life project, how do you make it fresh and exciting? And how do you prevent it from getting stale? What I learned from my t-shirt brand was that I let it get stale because mentally I wasn't creating or challenging myself in any new way for these t-shirts. I just kept on making them the same way for like 10 years, and nothing was being progressed in it. So with the cartoons, instead of writing a funnier joke or more emotional message, I'll just stop writing them for like months. And that's when I'll go into like paintings. And I'll just start doing it in a different way without dialogues. I'll stop drawing them pen and ink style and I'll go into it with brushes. And that, if I do paintings for several months, I'll have all these ideas of dialogues I want to jump into. And that bouncing back and forth is what keeps it fresh for me now.
What a process, because it's so different from person to person.
Yeah.
Speaking of that process, obviously it's in the name, it's in your work up until now. Pigeons are the life of your work. Just like pigeons are so iconic and it's such a connotation to New York, so are animals like rats or other symbols. Have you ever considered, I've seen cats in your work.
Yeah.
Have you considered incorporating other creatures, even if it's humans, or are you sticking to pigeons and maybe every now and then if another animal?
Yeah, so recently there's been a lot of people requesting. So the cats came about just because, I don't know, it was just me kind of branching off into this sort of like side story.
Yeah.
But then because that, I didn't realize how, like, what kind of like can of worms this would open up. People started asking me to do like specifically their dog. So at first I was like, all right, cool. A gig is a gig, right? Like I go back to those days of eating ramen. I'm just like, a gig is a gig, like scratching myself. And I would do like family portraits, pigeon style, and incorporate a little portrait of their dog.
I love that.
And I did it once. Then they tell their friends. I'll do it twice. And then I did a post one time, and then it got out of control. And I was like, as much as I want to do this for people, I don't want to veer too far from my original thing, which is like, I don't want to be a dog portrait. No offense to like dog portrait artists. It just wasn't really my thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go too far in that direction. I'll do it for funsies, but I didn't want people to be like, hey, can you just do my dog? Like if they want me to put the pigeon with the dog, I'll do that. But if they want me to just do their dog, I'm like, I'm sorry. Like there's hundreds of different, animal portrait artists out there. Like I'm sure they can do it way better than me. So I had to start declining those things.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, especially for artists who are still struggling to find their niche or their style, their voice, and maybe even kind of muster up the authority to set boundaries. What has that process been like for you in terms of learning what are your non-negotiables versus what will you maybe bend for? How do you put your foot down to keep the integrity of what you've set out to do initially?
It's how I feel about it either while I'm making or after I finish making it. If I feel like I really kind of pooped out a piece and I just wasn't feeling good about it, I just know that I don't want to do those type of gigs. And I don't want to like lead anyone on either. I don't like the feeling of doing something and really not feeling excited about it and then faking excitement, saying like, oh yeah, like this is great, right? Like I hate that feeling. I hate pretending. And so if it doesn't feel right for me, I have to just say, I'm sorry, like this isn't like it. I wasn't feeling this, or I can't do this for them and feel like I'll be doing a good job for them,
right?
Because it's just not me, like I don't want them to think that I'm gonna just take the money and run, like if I'm not feeling good about it, I just don't feel good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important reminder to us all, regardless of what we do in life, that it does take a lot of introspection of checking in.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? Do I feel good about it? Something
Yeah.
as simple as that. But sometimes the most simple things are hard to accept, or to realize or make the time to think about it, so thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I did have to take on a lot of gigs though, and part of me also wanted to take the challenge on too. I wanted to, I knew how to do the things that I do, and I wanted to, if somebody gives me a curveball, I'll be like, hey, can you do one of, like let's say the first person who asked me to draw a portrait of their dog. I did it because I haven't done it before and I wanted to see if I can do it. And I took on these gigs as more of like, all right, like let me take it as a challenge. Let me take it as like an assignment that was given into me, and that's not something that's on autopilot that I have to really do research and think about to do. And I did enough of those to know what I like and don't like. That's how I came to the conclusion of what I will say yes and no to. I did a bunch of them before realizing that it just doesn't make me feel good.
The trial and error, the actually putting it to the test. That makes sense.
Yeah.
When it comes, you mentioned earlier that you're trying to be more family friendly in certain aspects of your work. I couldn't help but notice a bit of a parallel. You and I were speaking before we started recording that you have a young son and you're making family more of a priority in your life.
Yeah.
Curious to know how that, if at all, will continue to play a role in your artwork. Maybe will there be baby content? Will you, just like you incorporate yourself with the headphones, will you incorporate your son in some way or your family?
Oh yeah, there's actually a bunch of cartoons that I've done already with like a little baby pigeon on there. That's definitely like a family portrait. The family element of it actually came a couple of years before my son was actually born. And I actively sell at a market on Prince and Mulberry. Pardon the plug, but I occasionally occasionally I sell there. I've been selling at this outdoor market on Prince Street for years. The owner of that market, because we're butted up against a church wall, and the owner of that market is a patron of the church, and she's super hardcore religious. I'm not personally religious, but I will respect anyone and everyone's beliefs, right? And she told me one time that she would like me to not sell any cartoon with the F-bomb on it. And at first, I was really upset at her for telling me, like, you can't tell me what I'm allowed to sell or not. Like, that feels like censorship. But then, I made peace with it. I made chaotic peace with it.
What does that mean?
I agreed to it, but angrily.
Okay.
But then after a while, I guess I was more in tune with how many families actually approach my table. And personally, I love it when kids blindly read off cartoon after cartoon. And it's kind of like it's like a 50-50. Some parents are like, oh, once they have their kid read profanity, they take them away and they walk away, escort the kids away. But then other parents are like super chill and cool. They're just like, they're gonna learn it eventually. And I think that's cool, but you don't know. Like I'm not there to piss anyone off either. Just like how that that person from Germany reached out about that cartoon that she bought for like 7 years ago. I want people, even if they don't buy anything, to just have a good experience at my table. And if their first impression is, oh, this stuff is just gutter, for my kids, I don't want that to be the last impression before they carry on their day.
Totally.
So I consciously made the decision, let me pull back on that. Like, I'll still post it occasionally. But not as often as I used to, because even on Instagram, there was this one woman that reached out because during my mentally dark phase in my life, I was posting a lot of cartoons that were just, they're not inappropriate, but they were just dark. And she wrote this really long message for me of why she unfollowed me. And I was like,
wow.
What? And she, was really nice about it. She told me why she originally liked my work, like that I posted, and how she looked forward to it. But then the stuff that I was posting, it didn't really line up with, it didn't make her feel good. And that's when then I went back to the post. I'm like, what am I posting exactly? Like, what is it that is, I thought it was my sense of humor, and I actually don't even know what it was, but it wasn't what it is now. But that this was like 5 years ago, and I still think about it to this day, about everything how something as small, this is when I only had maybe like 100 followers, like how much whatever I put out there actually has an impact. And I was so naive about that. I saw it as a platform and I was just having fun.
Yeah.
But as the brand grows, there's a certain set of responsibilities that I had no idea that I had to be aware of.
Absolutely. And it's a learning process, I'm sure. So definitely
Yeah.
give yourself some grace because
Yeah.
you've now learned. But it is one of those things that you're reminded sometimes through these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
How else have you used the responsibility that you just mentioned through your platform, would you say?
You know, when you hear an Eminem song and you hear like, Eminem going back and forth with his characters, like either Stan or Eminem or Marshall Mathers, like, they talk to each other in these skits. And, there's a lot of like conversation in his music. And it's just how, in one perspective is, the artist is creating what they create, but then how far that ripple goes. Now, I'm not saying that I have the kind of reach that he has, but those lyrics had like a lasting impression on me in some way of how it affects people, and what we put out there is, if somebody really looks up to it, they're gonna follow it to some degree. And if I happen to, have a cartoon where somebody young caught on really early, which I have, a young, a small following of like young kids following my page, I have to be responsible for that, and I have to make sure that they have at least some sort of a positive message out there.
Absolutely.
For me, for them, from me, for them.
Do you think becoming a father has slightly influenced that perspective?
I want to say yes. I just don't know how yet. I want to say yes because now I'm getting to the point where like, oh, he's a sponge, and I gotta work. I have to be careful with what I say. But I was also I'm also still kind of just being me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, well, if he says a curse, it's kind of cute when he says it as a kid, and I think it's fun, but I don't know if the mom really likes that.
Right, totally. I do want to revisit an aspect of your journey that I think is very important, which is the street vending experience and being part of all of these markets. How did you get into these markets, and what selection criteria do you use for those that you choose to participate in? What is that experience like? Like, tell us the POV being on the other side of the table.
Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier about how, New York City has countless opportunities. If you can't find one of those opportunities and you have a skill, just put that skill in people's faces. Like literally, and that, if you, I have a two-dimensional stuff, fold out a table and just plop it on the street. Do a little bit of research so you don't get a ticket, as far as like how to vend on the street. But when the recession hit and all the places that I was applying for were downsizing, I didn't want to lose the studio that I had. That was my motivation to go and get it. And I saw a bunch of street vendors on Broadway and Prince Street. That's where I first posted up. And a couple of days before, I would go there each day, seeing who set up where to make sure that I did not step on anyone's toes. I didn't want to set up accidentally on a spot where some guy has been selling for the past 30 years. Because street vending especially is very territorial. And people will fight you for their spot.
Oh my goodness.
It's rough. It's like it's a whole underground scene because like it's brutal. It's brutal. And because it's their livelihood. You don't want to mess with anyone's livelihood. You don't want to do anything respectfully. You don't want to do anything that messes with anyone's pockets. So you just kind of make sure that you do your research, even if it comes out to scouting a location. So I was on Prince and Broadway, and on the weekends it gets pretty crowded. So I was just like, I'll just carve out a nook somewhere. On the weekdays it's completely empty, and I found out the hard way of why it's always empty. And
Why is that?
Tourism, has it ebbs and flows.
Okay.
Tourism peaks Fridays through Sundays and, residually into Monday, slows down Tuesday, Wednesday, and then picks back up on Thursday. So people just kind of go with the flow. So effectively, it's like, industry hours. People work their asses off on the weekends and then they take the weekdays free. And street vending is the same way. We kind of, if you're a street artist or street vending, you kind of go where the tourists are, which also kind of connects to why, like selling the New York City stuff kind of ties in. Just like, all right, like there's a huge tourist industry. Might as well tap into that.
Totally.
But when it comes to, finding a spot and that eventually, street vending is awesome because there's no rent. The rent is if you get a ticket that day, which is possible. Not
Is
guaranteed.
it kind of like Russian roulette? Or
Yeah.
you do your research to a certain extent?
Do your
but-
research and don't piss anyone off. And imagine like Russian roulette with like a couple of more bullets. It's like it's against you, but you'll get away with it most of the time. Sometimes. And then eventually street vending, like you can do a whole career with just street vending, which is what I've seen. I've seen successful artists just sell on the streets and like that's their livelihood. I've seen other artists supplement their income with the streets, but they also do weekend markets or they'll do markets out in the Hamptons or upstate or another city even. And it's, then it goes into the world of being like a market vendor, right? But if, market vending, you have to put up an investment. You have to put up money. You have to pay the rent effectively.
Right.
So it's still, it's calculated risks. But when you're first doing it, it's all risk. You don't know how your stuff will compete. But the streets is a great place to trial your stuff because there's no rent and it's just in your face selling. So if you have a new idea, and this is before like Instagram was really, really big. I mean, Instagram was around, but like, social media, people are so paranoid about putting their artwork up on the internet because they're afraid that it's going to get stolen. The idea is going to get stolen. Everything's going to get, parodied off of each other to some degree. You just have to just go out there and just do it and just be the first one to do it better. And yeah, then street vending will pay for markets. Markets will be a result of what worked and what didn't work with your street vending. And then you just kind of snowball at.
So what balance have you found? Have you found that of street vending and markets? You mentioned earlier you're kind of being more selective.
Yeah. So one of the biggest risks are the holiday markets. There's a ton of money put into it, invested into it, between inventory, between the rents. But that, like, you're not going to be just an amateur doing a big holiday market. Like, I didn't do my first holiday market until after like 10 years of selling on the street. And it could have been sooner. I was just scared. I was honestly, that's what it was. I was scared to put that kind of money because at the time, I never had more than 4 digits in my bank account. So to put all that to one purchase that didn't have a guaranteed outcome
Right.
it felt very gambly to me. So it wasn't until one of my other market buddies really kind of pushed me into it. He shared with me his numbers. We have 2 totally different products, but he gave me an idea of what I should kind of look for, what I should try to expect. And that gave me more confidence. And I just said, F it, I'm just going to fill out the application. And if I get accepted, cool, I'll figure it out. I'll borrow money from my parents or something, or I'll just, go out and sell more if I have to. I'll sell on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and whatever. And, I went all in. And that was back in 2018, I think.
Okay.
And the rest was history. Like, once I got a taste of like what the holiday market selling is like, it's like, okay, I've met a handful of people who literally live off whatever they make during the holidays, and they live off of that
For the rest of the year?
until the next holiday market.
Oh my
And they'll
gosh.
do an occasional pop-up in the Catskills or something like that,
Yeah.
or like out in Long Island or out in Chicago. But the holidays ramp up their presence on the internet. that coasts them through the year, and then they'll reintroduce themselves in the holidays again. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, I want to do that. I wanna see what that feels like. And but I'm also a workaholic, so like I just like keeping myself busy. So it's tough for me to kind of step back when I know that there's so much opportunity to put my stuff out there.
Totally. When it comes to collaborations, maybe, have you considered collaborating with brands, with artists, anything along those lines? Or would you like to? And if so, who?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool. I just feel really insecure because I feel like my stuff wouldn't be good enough. You know what I mean?
Gosh,
Like,
no.
I know. It's totally, it's a mental game, right? But at the same time, like, I don't know how to approach that.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what the logistics are. I don't know what the legalities are. Like, to me, it's just like, all right, let me just keep making stuff. And when I go into this other realm of like where I want to bring this brand that I created, and I didn't know it was going to be a brand, what am I going to do with this? Like, what, I have this thing. What am I going to do with it? Who am I going to show? Who am I going to bring into this? Who am I going to bring this to? These are questions that I'm still actively trying to find answers for. Because for me, I'm just this hermit who just stays in the studio and I just create. And that brings me joy.
Describe your studio. Would you say it's your happy place?
It's beautifully chaotic. It's got, I mean, I've been in my studio for so long. Shout out to Jen of 1896 because she is such a awesome person to have this community of artists that doesn't treat the tenants like a product. And I find that to be rarer and rarer like in the city. And she still upkeeps this community of other artists for us to not have to worry about paying rent, but instead have the ability to create art with a little less financial stress. But yeah, the studio itself is, I mean, it just has anything and everything in there for me to readily make something as soon as an idea hits. So I am addicted to scouring on like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist for like people who either are like moving out of their studio or shutting their studio down or moving out of state and they just have art supplies left over that they're just trying to get rid of, whether they're giving it away or whether they're just selling it really cheap. I love finding those deals. And I'll just go in there and be like, oh, you have 77 canvases? I'll take all of them. Like, and I did that for years. And so I just collected all this material in my studio. And some of it I haven't touched in like 4 or 5 years until I started painting. I had literally several boxes of acrylic paints that I was just like, eventually I'll paint. And it just started collecting and it got pretty hoardy. And then once I started like, all right, acknowledging my hoarding problem, that's when I was like, all right, let me just use this or I'm going to throw it away. And I just said, all right, pumped out. That's when I started really getting into the bigger canvases that I'm working on now, is me not convincing myself that I have a hoarding issue.
That's so funny. I'm excited to see more of your paintings. I ask every guest this, which is, what inside scoop can you give us? What exclusive? What's coming up? What can we look forward to from PigeonBePigeon? Not to put pressure.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be creating more like of a family dynamic kind of a thing coming up soon. But at the same time, like I wanted to dabble on the idea of like, now that I'm kind of like, this is my first time ever doing like merchandising. So like, I just, after like 15 years, I finally have my own sticker. You know what I mean? Like why did that take so long? But, you know, by branching out into this merchandising world, it gives more of an opportunity for me to kind of put my stuff out there into like stores and stuff. So I wanted to see like, what can I create? I mean, this is a little bit more commercial. What can I create to expand the business to free up more time so I can work on bigger paintings. And that's kind of what I'm working on right now. So like, even though like I'm kind of selling out creating merch, it frees up time so I can work on bigger, more important stuff that won't necessarily be something that I'm just trying to flip. But again, going back to that, I want to make something that's challenging myself again. And I need this for my brand to be fresh again.
Totally. And the challenge part, aside from the bigger size,
Yeah.
what else would you consider it to be?
I guess more like snapshots of my perspective of New York City. And I think that's what these bigger pieces are going to be.
I love it. I'm so excited. So looking forward to that and the collaborations that we're speaking into the air and into the universe. Before you go, I want people to know how they can support your work and how we can best follow. So share the socials.
Yeah.
What's the next market that we can catch you at?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram. And by active, I post maybe once a month now. My Instagram's PigeonBePigeon. I would say the best way to support is go out when you're traveling, wherever you are in the city, pay more attention to the people who sell on the streets and don't be afraid to ask them if they're the creators and really engage with the artists wherever you're going. And I think that will help me in the long run as someone who really genuinely enjoys selling on the streets to be getting more people to engage and not being afraid of approaching a street artist or a street vendor as far as what they have to offer. That doesn't feel like it's a high pressure sale. And I just want that to be out there, because if more people just can not be afraid to approach street vendors and ask them questions without feeling like they're going to have, some sort of a high pressure or some sort of a scam thing, like I just want them to be more comfortable with actual physical interaction again and not feel like they just have to always purchase stuff digitally.
I love that. Does that stem from maybe noticing a difference in terms of the in-person versus the online interactions from your perspective?
Honestly, I don't know. I just personally just like interacting with chill, cool people whenever I'm selling. People will literally just come up and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I just think that these are cool." And then and sometimes they'll be defensive. They'll be like, "Oh, I don't have enough. I can't buy anything right now." And I'm just like, you don't have to buy anything to enjoy it. I put this all up. Technically, I post it all up for free, so you can enjoy it on Instagram for free. If you don't mind selling your personal information.
For the low price of your entire life's information.
Right? But support the algorithms. But realistically though, like I like speaking with people who are artists and just need that one extra push. I enjoy talking about just personally, like what it's like to be an artist and how what's their perspective on their version of them being an artist, or just even if they're not artists, if they're just traveling and enjoying the city, what are they enjoying about the city?
Yeah.
Like what are people doing these days that I don't have to just see their social media version if I can talk to them in person?
Yeah, like the real thing, the raw, the organic.
When you're talking to someone, it's like that's happening live.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And it's just like I enjoy that so much that like I just want that to keep surviving.
Yeah. What do you want to come of PigeonBePigeon as a brand, as an art?
I think I want it to be one of those things that people just will have a good memory of. If it keeps going, awesome. If one day I just have to stop it for whatever reason, I hope that people remember it as a good thing.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh,
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was fun.
I love that you had fun. Me too. I very much look forward to continuing to see PigeonBePigeon all over the city. And like I said, that everything that we talked about, the big paintings, the collaborations that you might be scared to take a leap towards, that it all comes into fruition, still fueling that vision of yours to just leave a great impression give a smile to those, who maybe need it.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, thank you so much, truly. And thank you all for watching and listening. Until next time.